I'm CJ. This is my fabulous, wonderful, and lovely, never, ever horrible, glorious, shining, glittering spider monkey, ginger orangutan of a god for the new world, a religious figure for the new generation, a better taste than Coke. I nearly said Pope and Kexi, which is better than Coca Pepsi, I guess. Patrick. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, that's very kind of you to say so. Thanks for inviting me back on again. This is my, 63rd guest appearance?
Yeah, you've always been consistent with turning up. And we're levelled up again. Tonight we've got our friend, the fabulous Martin Charlton, joining us. Thank you, Martin.
Hello.
How far art thou today?
Very well, thank you. It's half term, so everything's brilliant.
We have a teacher that comes into work, and you can always tell that she's visibly relieved whenever the kids are off. But she comes in with so much stress at the regular time. So we kind of swap stress levels, it seems. So ban school holidays, says I.
I know.
Keep them in forever.
Get substitute teachers to come in for when I'm not there.
Tell the good folks about yourself, if you will.
See, this is where I kind of feel like a fraud, because
you're not a fraud. You're lovely. And you're amazing conversation.
Everybody else,
you a couple of years. So has he. So none of that, sir.
No. Well, everybody else who comes on has this, I write for such and such, or I do such and such a podcast, or I'm some great luminary in the field, and kind of all I do is I kind of sit in a room while kids make video games, and I get paid for it.
But this is cool, and great conversation, like I say, and we've known you for a couple of years now with sort of chats on Twitter and stuff. So it's nice on the one hand to be able to natter properly, but yeah, Christ, never sell yourself short on that front, because you're doing good things, and you're showing the next generation of what may be entertaining is, I guess.
And I always feel like a lot of my time is spent just convincing a new crop of kids to just buy Souls games.
So you just Bamco PR, right?
They've probably
good Bamco PR.
They've probably sold 20 or 30 copies just off me. So I'd quite like.
So you're probably owed a kickback. You're owed a kickback of some point. You think?
I am anything.
I think I pretty much did that, but with the Wii U. I think I sold more than Nintendo, and Midnight Resistance sold a bit more than me, and sold mine to me, and so it went on a little bit like that.
You make it sound like a pyramid scheme.
In many ways, it is. And if you're just joiners, you will find out.
So, can you tell us, Martin, about your making kids to make games? Because that sounds really interesting, and I've never actually talked to you at length about it.
Yeah, well, I started out just teaching sort of bog standard film studies and media studies, and then one time my head of department pulled me aside and said, "You like games, don't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she just kind of said, "Do you want to teach a games design course?" Which, at that point, I kind of shat myself, because I hadn't made a game at that point. I was just kind of a fan. And she was like, "Oh, brilliant! You start in September." So
it's that easy.
Do you know what? I've been playing about making bloody coffee. Damn it!
Exactly.
Writing CVs and trying to earn experience. Do you want to do it? Yeah.
And that was kind of it, really. We started with about 4 students, and just sort of built out now, and we've got about 40 second years and 40 first years. So it's 80 kids scrambling around desperately, trying to make something or anything work, not just implode. And it's cool. I do feel like a fraud, because I sit and help people make games, and other people up the corridor teach maths and geography.
So what sort of age range is this?
It's 16 to 18. So
and what sort of stuff are they learning on? I mean, they're making stuff with something like Game Creator, or are you teaching them sort of design philosophies and histories of games, or classics or new stuff, or how do you kind of engage them as well as get them to make stuff?
Well, we use Game Maker, just because it's easy and it's cheap, and it's on a Humble Bundle often enough that they can just grab it for a couple of quid for a good cause, really. And then there are history units and there are sort of design philosophy units, which that's where I get my souls in. That's where I say you're all going to play a couple hours of Dark Souls, and if you don't like it, you can leave the course.
I like that there's rules.
Oh, you've got to have a system, haven't you?
It's all right to have your own opinion, but in this case, no. Democracy does not work in the case of Dark Souls.
But it becomes sort of mob mentality, because enough of them get converted that if somebody says they don't like it, I can just sort of sit back at that point and let the hunt begin.
Which is almost a bit Bloodborne.
Exactly.
So wait, you've trained an army of lackeys?
Kind of,
to defend your whim.
I like to call them believers, but lackeys works.
Not a cult at all.
No, absolutely no.
So, what have they? I mean, we'll dive into sort of your thoughts on the Souls games in a bit. But what have they made of Souls stuff thus far?
I mean, a lot of them like it, or a lot of them buy it and come back to me in a week and just say, I'm stuck. Or they say, I can't beat such and such a boss, or I don't know what I'm doing, or this graveyard full of skeletons in Firelink is really hard.
You pick up the phone, just like, I'm just calling your parents, just to let you've not got home anymore. You're now an orphan. Of course.
And occasionally, I will do the sort of walk them through it thing, and sometimes they'll give up, and sometimes they'll get all the way through it and absolutely fall in love with the series, and that's, in some ways that's as satisfying as them getting a really good grade at the end of the course.
Because I think in many ways that probably the older generation would know playing very, very difficult video games and just keep going at them because they were a form of entertainment that was, like you were playing a cartoon, but the standard that you had to beat a lot of those games was incredible, but you only got sort of 1 or 2 a year, really.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean for them, I kind of got a shock because I realised that the students I teach at the moment the youngest were born in 2000. So their sense of, what an 8-bit game was or what a 16-bit game was is Shovel Knight. And their sense of history is almost non-existent, and their idea of only having 2 or 3 games a year, it's preposterous. That's what you do if you don't like games.
I suppose I hadn't really thought about that they would maybe think, a classic game or a historical game is based on an art style more than anything, or a piece of sort of visual design, rather than, oh, this is an actual game that came from like 1980 or that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when they say to me, like, can you remember such and such a game? And it's, can you remember Final Fantasy 12? And in my mind, it just
hands up if you're in a library, if you're listening on a bus, just put your hand up now in solidarity if that makes you feel really old.
Yeah, I always
only Naughty's kids will remember this.
And it is weird because they say, like, I've still got my GameCube, and I kind of feel like I remember getting the bus to get my GameCube, and it doesn't feel 10 minutes ago. But for them, it was a thing that was in the house when they were born, or when they first got to games.
Yeah, I suppose back then as well, it would have been not this race to have the latest technology or the newest games, but just something that was there that they could play on that was of fascination would have been interesting, and drawing that line back with them could be, I'd find that fascinating to see what sort of hooked them in and what drew them in as such.
What I used to find a couple of years ago was that to a man, and it is mostly lads on the course, but they all had this affection for Rugrats Go to Paris on the PS1.
What?
And it was this weird sort of... They all had it, but that's gone now. because they're now too young. So now it's Time Splitters.
Really?
There's
that's okay.
Just loads of them come in and say like that was the game that their dad could play with them, or and that again makes me feel incredibly old, because imagine Time Splitters being your formative gaming experience.
Weren't the controls quite difficult on Time Splitters back then? I remember playing GoldenEye a long time ago, but wasn't it sort of that knuckle buttons to move left and right, or some sort of weird contraption for knocking about, or have they done dual analogues at that point?
Well, it'll be PS2, won't it? But I don't know because everybody points at Halo as locking down the control scheme, don't they? And I think it's probably ran about the same time. So
let me tell you what. Let me ask an expert, Laura. Time Splitters, to move the thing. Did you have to use the analog stick or the shoulder buttons to go up and down?
No, I mean like left and right and things like that.
Left and right. I could look in the manual, but we'll save that for later.
Because I'm
sure I remember it being a bit hard. Yeah,
I'm sure I was playing a couple of years ago. I picked up Armored Core 2 on the PS2, and that was one of those where you kind of moved around with one analog, and it didn't use the other analog. It was knuckle buttons to do like certain things, and it was how you had to get into that muscle memory of learning how to work a game before you could kind of play it in a way.
I remember PS1 shooters having like R1 and R2 being the look up and look down buttons.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
No, nothing. That was never a good system on anything ever.
When I went
but
back
it's really cool that you say that the kids have like got onto games with Time Splitters, because I remember bonding with Laura over that when I was like 18, and that being someone's first game, like first formative experience, like it makes you feel so old.
Exactly, and it sort of crept up on me, when I first started teaching the course in about 2008, and I was about 27, and I sort of still felt like I had a bunch of shared experiences with them. Whereas now they come in and they say, "Oh, my first game was Time Splitters, and all I play now is Counter-Strike and League," and I feel like I come from a different planet, so I have to get to work with the Dark Souls stuff pretty quickly.
Do you think there is that through line for them, kind of having grown on that multiplayer thing that they could play with their dad, that it's an easy transition to then playing, I don't know, Call of Duty or something like that with their friends?
I think so, and what I also find, and I don't know where you guys sit on this, but they have a game that they play, or they hear. All the players League or all the players Team Fortress 2, whereas I'm slightly, because I'm 35. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm sort of too late for the sort of the Pac-Man. All I play is Pac-Man, or all I play is Space Invaders or Defender. So I grew up sort of with that console generation where you play a game and you move on, you play a game, you move on. So the idea of just having one game and that is your game and it's all you play is really alien to me.
I don't think I've ever had that. Like, I've always been a variety. I've always had like 2 or 3 on the go at any one point. I can't imagine just playing one thing for like a year. I mean, Destiny doesn't really count because we do mix things in with that. But yeah, like I can't envisage.
Just, I don't know, for a lot of people there are. I mean, folks can mock the staples of your Grand Theft Autos and your Assassin's Creeds and your Call of Duties and stuff. But for a lot of people, these are, like the Marvel movies to them, that, they come along every year. It's a brand new adventure, something that they've got lineage with, that they can enjoy. And in times when money's short and, money's difficult, that it's like, well, I'll enjoy putting 40 quid on Assassin's Creed. I've always enjoyed Call of Duty. I've always enjoyed, GTA. So those become kind of modern day staples in the same way as big blockbusters have been. And we've got a guy that comes into work and he hadn't played games for years, and saw Destiny and was just really taken with it, and he bought a PS4 and Destiny, and I've never ever seen him play any other game. Literally, wow. And even when he goes to work, he leaves it on. so he's always in space. I think he's gone on holiday recently. I haven't seen him in the store for a while, but I think he must have gone on holiday and he's not been online. And for the first time, I'm kind of a little bit worried because I've never ever seen him not on Destiny or not sort of not in sort of space ready to play Destiny from the off. So I guess it does happen, and I suppose your FIFAs are a big part of that as well. And those foot packs that get opened on YouTube and things.
Is that like, because sort of the FIFA and the, that derogatory term of the casual gamer who only plays FIFA or only plays Call of Duty and only buys 2 games a year, and then there's like the super hardcore who only play 2 games a year, and there's sort of this weird middle ground in the middle that I kind of feel like is like an island that some people stand on, whereas the hardcore and the casual play 1 or 2 games, and then there's, I don't know what the term for the middle ground is.
We need it actually.
Let's go with normos.
Yeah.
Normos.
Normos.
For all our Australian listeners, we apologise. Again.
Bloody normo.
So what has their reaction been to Dark Souls in that regard? Has it been has there been a level of intrigue? How have they processed the visual look of it, the controls, the design? Because I presume you're breaking a lot of this down in front of them and sort of trying to get them to analyse it as you analyse it, and I'd find that fascinating to be a fly on the wall of, to be honest.
I mean, I hate it, but a lot of it does come down to the difficulty or the perceived difficulty. And, they always say, I don't want to play Dark Souls because it's hard, or I don't want to play it in a room full of other people because it's hard and everybody will, and I say, well, you're all going to be terrible at it straight away because you're all coming from other games. And I think what I always use when they say is it hard, the analogy I always go to, and it's probably imperfect, but I always say, well, you've played Mario Kart, you've played Forza, but if you play Mario Kart like it's Forza, or you play Forza like it's Mario Kart, you're going to be terrible at it. And what I says with Dark Souls is it looks like all those other games you've played, but it isn't one of those games. So if you're used to a Forza and it is the Mario Kart, so if you come at it like it's Devil May Cry or it's God of War or even like it's a Dragon Age or something, you're just going to find it weird because it is asking you to speak a different language.
How do they perceive the visual design as well?
I mean, visual design, they kind of, because I tend to start them on the first Dark Souls, which to their eyes, especially when they're first coming in, looks a bit rough for what they're used to. But, they quickly attune to sort of the visual tells, and they say, well, here's a door, and in Silent Hill there's 10,000 doors that never open. Whereas they quickly attune themselves in Dark Souls to, alright, I can see what's at the other side of that door, so no doubt I'm either going to get a key for that door, or I'm going to double back and come back through there. It's quite interesting watching them sort of rewire their brains.
Did they pick up on the messages on the ground at first, or was that something that you kind of had to instill on them in them with regards to, look, the game is sort of subtly telling you how to move, how to go through your menus, and
I mean, I would say it's a really good game for showing, not telling, that kind of, here's a thing off in the distance, well, you can go and get it, or look at the enemies and look at what they're telling you. Because I mean, I tend to start them off playing offline just because the internet at the sixth form that I work at doesn't like anything that isn't just a bog standard PC. So that's not really an option. But it is just waiting for that moment where it clicks, which I suppose we all had.
Where have you seen that kind of emerging the most, or the point where I don't know, not just they become fascinated with the world, but when they start to really make progress or push on?
I took and this wasn't an in-class thing, but I had a student who when they start, they always say, "Oh, what's your favorite game?" And I always just offer up Dark Souls as sort of the quick and easy, because it kind of is the right answer. But I also don't spend ages going, well, if you go back to the Super Nintendo and Secret of Mana is really excellent. I just sort of go to Dark Souls. and they say, all right, well, should I buy it? And I say, yeah, go buy it. And it's interesting watching them, because a lot of them, I always try to start them with Dark Souls, and I always say, if you get probably past, if you ring the first bell, you'll probably be all right. And a lot of them do, and occasionally they come in and they say, oh, I rang the first bell, and I say, oh, how was the fight? And they say, well, she kept farting lava all over the floor. And for me, the idea of getting to that first on your first playthrough and doing it, I kind of sit back then, because they're probably already better than I am.
That's incredible.
I know, and one of them, I remember doing it without the skeleton key. So he'd started the game, he'd found some, I can't even work out how he did it, but he rang that bell first, and I think he might have used the skeleton key, but he might have just got to Quelaag before he'd got to the gargoyles. So in my mind, I was like, this is insane. And I know there are a million different routes you can take through Dark Souls, but the idea of, I got to Quelaag and I beat her, and then he said, and I got to this guy after who's just this wall of lava who just keeps jumping along the rocks after me. And I said, well, how did you get on? How did you get on with the gargoyles? And he was like, what gargoyles?
No.
And
wow.
I know. And later in the year, right about Christmas, I tend to do a thing where I give all the groups a double lesson, and I get them to start a new game of Dark Souls, and I give them 2 hours, and I say, all right, we're going to have like an intergroup competition, and we'll see which group can get the furthest in 2 hours, and I watched this lad who'd done Quelaag first, and I watched him play it, and he was just some sort of savant. He was wonderful at it, and it was breathtaking. And by the end, everybody had given up any sense of trying to beat him and were just cheering him on.
That's awesome.
This
is like Disney are creating the perfect movie for me, because this is all playing out in my head, and I'm like, bring me the savant.
It is. It was like the wizard, And people were saying, "Oh, go do this," and he ran through and he got to the giant blacksmith in 2 hours.
No,
yeah.
How? I can't do that.
There was a point where, because we have a timer going in the background, so he knew how long he had left, and I think he got from the bottom of Sens to the top in about 80 seconds. He got halfway up and died, so he'd unlocked a couple of things. But when he actually did it, he got from the bottom to the top, and it was staggering. It made me want to stop playing it.
See, I get that feeling when you see streams crop up now and then doing like no weapon runs, or like your level 1 speed run in less than an hour. And you watch, and you're just mystified by how these people get so good at it. But then to actually see someone in front of you doing it, like online, it's different. Like you can see a streamer online doing stuff and think, oh yeah, well they're just a stranger online that does that with their time. Mm-hmm. But to see someone in front of you just tearing the game a new arse.
I said to him when he was done, it was as impressive a video game feat as I've ever seen in real life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
And
so I presume he's finished the game then now.
Oh, by sort of Easter, he was like, "Oh, I'm New Game plus 6," and just sort of doing all these weird runs that just to try and make the game, in his words, try to make it hard again.
So he hadn't played the game at all until you introduced it into the class.
He dabbled, that, and it's weird because it's my story, but the thing of he bought it and he got a certain distance and just sort of couldn't figure out where to go next, or it got a bit hard, or got distracted with something else, and had it on his pile of shame, and I sort of convinced him to pick it back off the pile.
So, what have you spoken to him about? What he considers like his biggest victory in that regard, as his his sort of standout moment?
I mean, he did various Soul Level 1 runs, and he actually left where I teach in the summer, but he was in the middle of a Soul Level 1 run of Dark Souls 3, which is just beyond me. You know, and I think they were his crowning jewels.
Because I do always find it funny when people kind of prejudge like that. I remember seeing that there's a streamer on Twitch who was getting some kind of fake gamer girl abuse from one guy, and she was on something like NG plus of Dark Souls 3 with doing the Soul Level 1 run, and she's cracking lass, and she's amazing at Dark Souls, but it's seeing that kind of determination and battle is it's beyond my level, certainly. But
I mean, finishing the game without summoning for the majority of the bosses is beyond me. So I'm not a proud man.
So have there been any viewpoints that you've seen in the class that have kind of trickled from sort of one kid to the other, and them all? I know you said they were all cheering him on at that point, but has one viewpoint changed the opinions of the others on the games that they play, and just falling into Souls, I guess?
I mean, it is sort of, it's interesting because there's that initial rush of about 5 or 6 of them who pick it up as soon as they start. I do the hard sell on them, and they go out and they buy any. I always say buy any of the games. I don't mind. And it's interesting because that initial wave sort of carries over, and 4 of the 6 might finish it, and then you'll sort of get this odd one just going like, oh, I bought Dark Souls, and the other day I had this one lad. Like called Josh, who plays games but isn't. You would never have him down as a Souls kid. I didn't even really do the sales pitch for him. And he plays what he plays, and that's absolutely fine. He's going to get the top grade, so I kind of leave well alone. And he just said, "Oh, I bought Dark Souls 2." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I've messed around with it a bit." He said, "I've dabbled, but I don't think I'm doing very well." And I was like, all right. He's like, I haven't been playing online. I was like, where are you? He's like, oh, I'm at some really dark room with this woman with a sword. And I worked out that he was at the Lost Sinner. And I said, how long have you been playing? He's like, oh, exactly. He says, oh, just a couple of nights, just here and there. And I thought, just, oh God, here's a bloody another one coming in, making me look bad at Souls. And I don't need any help from these guys to look bad at Souls. So
and he got through to Lost Sinner.
And I mean, he was stuck. He said he'd had about 20 runs. But to get to that point blind, without summons as your first Souls game, it's not bad. And I'm always amazed at how well they do, or humbled, I guess, by how well they do, because I kind of suck at it.
Can you see their opinions that the opinions that are broadening here in the way that they're then trying to make their own games, or is that sort of very much them just taking their own ideas and running with them, and the joy of purely creating?
I think that they become less afraid of what is sort of perceived difficulty, and they say like, well, it's all right to have somebody. Quite often when they start making games, they want people to get through them, for them to be sort of accessible, and by the end they're like, they're going to die a lot on this, but it's okay.
That's fab.
Wow.
It's a real sort of, I don't know, turnaround in their perspectives.
And they kind of embrace that, and they go off and they play other games, and I think a lot of them, especially when Lords of the Fallen came on, because it was on Games with Gold a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then PS Plus, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
Plus
a lot of them went straight into that, and a lot of them just sort of say, well, I'll try games on hard, or I get less frustrated, or a lot of them sort of treat them as single player games where they have grown up predominantly with multiplayer stuff. And that's kind of interesting, because it does broaden their tastes beyond this concept of difficulty and just into a different take on what multiplayer means. Multiplayer doesn't mean 4 of you running it for the people necessarily. It means, some of them who pride themselves on being almost internet trolls. And then by the end they say, "Oh, I just spent the night getting summoned in either of the Anolondos or
awesome.
whatever," and that is really cool, And when one lad who just plays nothing but military shooters, and he says, "Oh, I'm New Game +6 in Dark Souls 2," and I just like, I can't get past New Game Plus, so and he just quietly does it, just keeps chipping away. And he says, "Whenever I finish it, I just restart it and just start playing again," and it's wonderful, and like I say, I deserve that kickback.
So have you spoken to them about the change in multiplayer, or the view of multiplayer games when Demon's Souls came out and it started doing not just the summoning mechanic but the invading mechanic as well?
I do. I mean, and I talked to them about that, but hand on heart, I missed Demon's Souls when it first came out. My first experience was Dark Souls the day it released, but so when I went back to Demon's Souls, it was very quiet online, and like I say, I'm not very good, so Demon's Souls was a real slog for me. But I talked to them about that concept of what does multiplayer mean other than 2 versus 2, or that conventional notion of PvP in their head and what that means. And they're always really interested in sort of, I get a lot of ideas for games of sort of asynchronous multiplayer coming out of that, well, while they're doing this, they're doing this, and it always kicks me back to something like, do you ever play Swiv?
What, the old Amiga shooter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of things like that, or...
what was Swiv? I'm a young boy.
It was a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up where one of you played a jeep and one of you played a helicopter.
Okay.
Really good shooter as well.
Oh, see, that sounds great.
Yeah, it was great. So one of you could obviously fly across the landscape and really sort of spray out the bullets, but the other one had to drive around the stuff and try and sort of shoot the mans. And was it a jeep or was it a tank? I think it was a tank, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But it was a good shooter. It was made in Britain as well, wasn't it? So.
And I mean, I never mentioned Swiv to them, but a lot of them sort of take the notion of if you summon someone, and I tend to play as Dex guys, so I get in there and I get my hits, and somebody when you summon a sorcerer and they just stand at the back of the room and just wreck shop, and a lot of them sort of talk like that. Because with Game Maker, they do make 2D games, so a lot of them sort of accidentally make Swiv without me ever mentioning it. With that sort of class-based thing. And I'm trying to think what that other game was. It Renegade Ops? It was a few years ago. It was like a class-based shooter, and they sort of take their Souls philosophy and make that out of it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
or the Dukes of Hazzard PS2 game where one of you drove the car, the other one shot the gun.
I was actually going to mention that. Was it Dukes?
That game was fun. Yeah, was it
Starsky and Hutch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, that game was really fun.
I think I only ever got the setup working for that once. Where one guy was driving and one was shooting, but it was fucking brilliant. It felt like oh god, I wish they still made Chase HQ games.
God yes.
God
yes.
So I have a question about your youngsters. Do you find that when you sort of say, "Hey, we're playing Dark Souls today," have any of them already played it and go, "Ah, yeah. I know this lesson"?
Yeah, loads of them, and they sort of. It's interesting because they bring their knowledge in and try and sort of corrupt the other guys. So we were doing one lesson once, and it almost doesn't matter who's got the pad because everybody sort of. It's like Twitch plays Dark Souls, but with, 20 sweaty teenage lads. And it's interesting because you see them sort of, one of them, they went at the Undead Burg and they found the merchant. And one of them just said, well, if you kill him, you get a really good sword. So the guy with the pad just killed him. And then somebody else straight away said, but he also sells loads of good stuff that you kind of need. At which point it was too late because he was already dead. So... That was a lot of the plans for that run scuppered, And I said, well, that was almost like when you see it was seeing the sign on the floor, but the sign on the floor that said great sword ahead or something, was just a person in your ear saying, "Go on, kill him." And there was some foul language in the room after that.
I suppose you've got burgeoning independent thought in that regard as well, because so many games are curated to the point where it's like, if you go down to here, you can get this magic sword from the dragon. But the game, especially with the messages on the floor, will happily lie to you or tell you a truth that you have to make a judgment on, and I'm very curious to see how they then process not just the rest of the game, but games thereafter that are just straight down the line and quite vanilla in the way that they share their story.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of an example specifically of that, but a lot of them. It's interesting because my route through Dark Souls was buy it, bounce off it, go away, play Dragon's Dogma, and sort of find like a halfway house. And then Dragon's Dogma sort of reignite the flame, no pun intended.
That was good.
I know. And it actually was accidental. I wish I could take credit for it. But, that I sort of went away and I played Dragon's Dogma, and then I thought, well, maybe this Dark Souls thing is for me. And I went back. And I say a lot of them sort of do that. They go away and they play, they bounce off Dark Souls and they go away and they play something that reminds them of it, or they go away and play something else. And I think there was an Edge article that said the same thing, but they go away and play something else, and it just seems a bit bland. And even if they'd bounced off, they then go back because they say, well, this other thing is a bit, linear, or a bit. It's a bit too willing to just show me all of its tricks straight away. So they go away, and then we all crawl back, don't we?
I suppose there's that fascination of why they're coming back to something when they had such an adverse reaction to it, but now they can't move on with something else. That's really neat, and especially at that kind of age as well. Those because the likes of ourselves have experienced sort of quite a few games and stuff, but at this young age, especially if they've just been playing the likes of the Counter-Strikes and stuff, I'm fascinated to see how that then enters into the mix.
Yeah, and it is super interesting to hear them say, I just found myself thinking about it, in the shower or on the bus or walking the dog. I was sitting on the toilet and suddenly I just wanted to beat the Capra demon.
And you're sitting there going,
quotes.
and you're sitting there nodding along and smiling, and inside going, yes, another one.
Absolutely, and you hear them. They come in and they say, "Oh, I beat it, or I beat this, or I beat that," and it is just wonderful. It's like watching them grow, and like I say, like a lot of it does turn into essays about design, or discussions of sort of FromSoft or Bandai Namco's role in distribution, or what it means to be a video game auteur, and all of that stuff. But a lot of it just comes down to I beat it.
But any of those is fine. That's amazing, especially if it leads to not just them looking at other games in other ways, but they keep coming back and they keep finding that fascination that the likes of ourselves are.
It's interesting because all of the archetypes crop up, all of the stories that we all hear. Where one of them was, he was playing Bloodborne. He said, one night I'm going to beat this spider. And I kind of looked at him and I thought, well, maybe you will and maybe you won't. And there's no shame not beating Rom, because God knows he gives me enough trouble. And he came in and he said, I beat Rom. This game isn't about werewolves, is it? And I kind of said no, and it kind of never was. And that was just really cool, because I then suddenly had 45 conversations I wanted to have with him, but I knew I couldn't. I had to leave him.
Having bounced off Bloodborne as many times as I have, and then really clicking with Dark Souls 3 is kind of my halfway house in the same way as you had your with Dragon's Dogma. But the following the death of Rom was one of the most gobsmacking things I've ever seen and experienced in games. I can't imagine being 16 years old and trying to process that in my head, because now I can't process that in my head. It still is one of those things where I think about it and it sends chills through me. I think it's brave. I think it's visually brilliant. It still rocks my world. But at that age, crying out loud.
And I mean, I don't know, Paddy, if you remember what happened to me first time I beat Rom, because I remember messaging you about it.
What? Refresh me, because it's been a long time.
Well, I beat Rom, and I got a Rom in pretty good time because I summoned a lot. I beat Rom, and then obviously you're meant to get the cutscene, aren't you?
Yeah.
And it just never popped for me, and I hit some sort of bug, and had to start the game over.
Oh God, no. Yeah!
And I
remember.
And I couldn't. I've still got that save, and I still want to go back and see if I can sort of get. I wonder if I get captured or something, but that just never popped. So I got to the sort of the quote unquote big reveal. And had to start the whole game over without ever getting it. So when I finally got to that point, you appear, and there's the giant spider monsters on the wall, and it kind of lost something for me, because I was just like, oh well, I'm just really glad it worked this time, because there was that moment as I beat Rom, and I did honestly think, if this doesn't work again, I'm just gonna either trade the game in or just snap the disc or something. Yeah, because it was heartbreaking.
Oh, I've been there. Have you heard about my Oblivion story?
No.
Oh God! So Oblivion's long, right? It's a long game. I was a good, I would say, 80 hours in to my first run of Oblivion, and I was saving, and there was a lightning storm, and we had a power cut as it was saving, and the entire hard drive corrupted, and it was gone. All of my Oblivion save gone. So I started again a few times, and I couldn't quite do it. And I do a character and get so far and go, can't be doing this. And then when I finally went back, I did a real run. I went fists only. I thought I'll make it special, I'll make it weird. And I beat the game, and I did it, and I was really proud. And it's like the last quest you get is go to the Imperial City in a week and get your dragon armor. I was like, cool, I'm going to walk there. Because this is the lap of honor. I'm going to walk there, and as I was walking there, my PS3 yellow light of death.
No.
Yeah, it's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me in a video game, and I fell to my knees, and I couldn't even shout. I was just broken.
It's horrible,
mate. Oblivion's cursed. I've still got that disc. A friend of mine extracted it, and I've kept it in its disc to remind myself to always back up my saves. Because that is the worst thing that has ever happened in a game, and like we're talking like this is 150 hours worth of that save at the end, just gone, like, and so I can only imagine the misery of having to beat Rom twice and then being like, please work, please.
So now, whenever I play Bloodborne, I kind of like the Rom fight, but I always have this sort of sick feeling when I come up to it. And I've never heard anybody, and if anybody listening to this had the same thing, like, let me know that it wasn't just me, because it was heartbreaking, and I had no idea how far I was through the game, and every Souls or Bloodborne feels 10 times longer first time through, because you don't know the geography, you don't know the enemies, etc., etc. So in my mind, I'd walked 50,000 mile, and could have been near the end of the game, because Bloodborne, like, I'm not very good at Dark Souls, but I'm rubbish at Bloodborne, and just the idea of having to pick yourself up and start again, and punch that werewolf at the beginning, and just to be back there, it was heartbreaking. That was the real Souls for me. You think it's hard?
Thank you, Bloodborne.
That sorry.
What drove you on in the case of that second run? Then was it just a case of did the game feel in many ways like I don't know, that you were more used to the mechanics and you're not making the same sort of mistakes, for better or worse, that you did the first time, or how did you was the new stuff you noticed, or was it really getting back to that point again and then finding that extra progress?
I suppose, not to be sort of reductive about it, but Bloodborne's just really good. Not that the others aren't.
It's really good though, isn't it? Like, it's just really good.
It's just really good. It's like a 9 or a 10 or something. I really like it. I mean, I always have this argument with my students, and they really struggle to get their heads around it. And there was an Edge article that I can't find, which makes me think that I dreamt it, but it was about video game sequels and about how there's like the narrative sequel to a video game, and there's this sort of ludic sequel to it, where the same guy builds on the mechanics, and it might not necessarily even be in the same franchise, but and the example I always say is Vanquish is the sequel to Resident Evil 4, not Resident Evil 5. Because it's Shinji Mikami taking the ideas of Resident Evil 4 and building on that, building another third-person shooter, and it's sort of what Mikami did next, whereas Resident Evil 5 is what Albert Wesker did next. And Bloodborne in that way is kind of the actual sequel to Dark Souls. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 are like the narrative sequels to it, whereas Bloodborne is the mechanics sequel to it.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that's kind of where I sit on it. So for me, Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 are like more Dark Souls, whereas Bloodborne is different enough. So that was just starting it again. I was like, well, this is just, if I have to start it again, then great, I get to play it again.
Using the Mikami sort of motif again, what was the game that he did, which was very much like Resident Evil 4 afterwards?
Is that Shadows of the Damned?
Yeah. So you've got if Mikami's got Shadow of the Damned, is Dark Souls 3 Hidetaka Miyazaki's Shadow of the Damned?
I guess I don't know which one we're doing a disservice to there. Really?
If it helps, I thought Shadow of the Damned was a bit wank, and I think Dark Souls 3 isn't as good as Bloodborne. So that analogy is quite good for me. That works really well.
I mean, like Shadows of the Damned is maybe if Mikami's like progressed with Vanquish and he's trying new things, he's kind of maybe falling back into a similar design sense with Shadows of the Damned, whereas Miyazaki's coming back to Dark Souls more thematically, I guess. But I don't know. I'm curious to know your thoughts on. Let's go Dark Souls 3. Big thoughts anyway, especially after you fell in love with Bloodborne.
Right. So they're kind of the opposites for me. Where Dark Souls 3, while I'm playing it, moment to moment, it's not to just fall back on it again, but it's really good. And I like getting in there and having a bit slash and running around and finding shortcuts and getting to bonfires. But then if I don't play it for a while, I kind of step back and I go, it's all right, Whereas Bloodborne, while I'm playing it, I can kind of think, well, this forest full of snakes is a bit shit. And
how dare you?
I know.
The forest of infinite snakes.
How dare you?
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. And the
Paddy, I'm defending Bloodborne. Tell me from a year ago.
I don't understand what life is at this point. Am I dreaming? Is this the Hunter's Nightmare? I don't know.
And this is what you dreamed of.
And then so I'll have those moments where I think, well, this is all right, but there are too many bosses that are just weird tentacles flying around everywhere, or just hair. But then when I step back from Bloodborne and look at it as sort of a whole, it's beautiful. And it's sort of the micro of one and the macro of the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I can see that. Like some of the guys on Twitter, Gav Russell from You Died has been playing it again recently. Again, it's just like you see someone talk about Bloodborne, or I've been listening to a lot of the Don't Give Up Skeleton podcast recently, and just hearing people talk about it, I'm like, yeah, Bloodborne was a bit good, wasn't it? Like, and it's been on my mind for like 2 weeks now. Like, maybe I'll reinstall it next week. Maybe I can kick Laura off the TV and just get that reinstalled.
How did you uninstall Bloodborne?
Well, no, it's not uninstalled, but like just put the disc back in.
That's not the same thing. You're making it sound much more dramatic than it actually is.
I've got to get up, so.
You see, I've still got the DLC in that to tickle into and finish Canehurst as well because
Oh.
I left it at when I got nobbled by the boss. So.
Oh, well, I tell you what, the hardest thing in the world is following Rich Stanton on Twitter because he just won't shut up about it. You know, and I always fall back on that one tweet that he put out that just said, "Bury me with my copy of Bloodborne."
He's the coffee Jesus of Bloodborne.
He really is. And it was you know, I'd played my Bloodborne and I'd had my multiple playthroughs. And I was just at a place where I was fine with it on the shelf. You know, it's brilliant and it's over there. And then he just kept saying his tweets, and you get that itch, don't you? I could just play a little bit. I could just play up to ROM. I might just finish it. I might actually finish all the Chalice dungeons this time. And I just blame him really for everything.
Were you a fan of the Chalice dungeons then?
No, God, no. I'm a normal.
Yes.
You know, they're fine till they're not. I think is the sort of, you know, if you ignore them for a while and you go in and you do the first few and you're sort of over leveled for them, and you kind of think, well, these are visually uninteresting, but I'm kicking ass, so fuck it. And then they get hard. And you know, and I got to the one where they half your health, and never got any further because I'm rubbish.
Have you ever, speaking of Rich Stanton, have you ever introduced your students to the article he did about Dark Souls and real world stuff?
I've never. Side note: I used to teach his sister.
Okay.
But that's just a weird sort of, and I was following him on Twitter, and then I worked out who he was. And that was really weird. But I've never introduced them to it. But a lot of them have found it. You know, because it must just pop up when you type in. If you Google Dark Souls, is bloody brilliant, isn't it? It must just come up quite quickly. So I've seen a lot of them. Sort of, they end up referencing his work without me directing them to it. But that's probably just because he's bloody good. You know?
Very good. And that article I do keep coming back to. I mean, there's a friend of mine that has similar fascinations to me with regards to Greek history and Egyptology, and I was sort of sharing various bits of that Rich Stanton IGN article just for, you know, not just the architecture of buildings, but the armours and the histories of them and stuff. It's a wonderful, wonderful article. Which is now bookmarked on my phone because I keep reading it on my lunch.
He's just one of those people who's just irritatingly good, though, isn't he? You know, you read anything by him and you're like, oh, this just completely nails whatever I was thinking about, or, you know, just because was it Kotaku he just took over?
I think so, yeah.
Editing for a little while, and he's, you know, you notice that sort of spike in articles about Bloodborne on Kotaku. Don't you? Like,
someone
really
photoshopped a thing up the other day of the Kotaku front page, and like all the links at the top just said Bloodborne, Bloodborne, not Bloodborne. Nah, it's Bloodborne. And all the articles are why the new game? Why Overwatch is not as good as Bloodborne?
I think my big sort of Rich Stanton memory is when he was going through the original Dark Souls 2. There was a point where I'm sure it was something like a Sunday night. He was taking on all comers in the Belfry. And he's just like, "This is mine. Get out!" He's just like taking everybody down that was coming into the Belfry and stuff. And I was like, I don't think it even sort of got that far at that point. I was like, oh, "Cool, you're a bit good at these, aren't you?"
I'm always interested, CJ, that you always get these games and you quite clearly love them with all of your heart, but you don't have to take your time getting through them. You know,
I do. I kind of marinate myself in them a little bit.
Fucking tell me about it.
I can't get my I can't get my head around sort of how people kind of hammer into them so quickly, because or what I'm doing differently. I presume it's the gaming equivalent of me sitting down with my dinner, and I'm a really slow eater and just sort of like chewing lots and cutting in small amounts, and Paddy would just be like,
you push the peas around, don't you?
Paddy, you remember when I gave you one of those amazing Jakeman's lozenges?
Yeah.
And you, these are things that I really like. They're old people sweets, but I can stuff one in the corner of my mouth, and I'll be like an old person, not the sweet. Only joking. Yeah, and I can. They can last for ages. But I gave one to Paddy. He was just like done.
Well, yeah, because like I like to consume. Okay, so CJ. So at the same time, you are both the best person to play video games with and talk about with, and also the worst person. Because you dig in really well and you know lots of things about them and you enjoy them. But at the same time, it's like, what was it? Was it Dark Souls 3? It's like, I'd beaten it. And you're like, well, where are you? Where are you? So, I'm at the halfway bonfire where Anri is. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I do. But there will always be, this is always the fun of when we do have conversations, there will always be stuff where you've hammered ahead and I might have found something, or me kind of grinding around something, or trying to learn a certain part of it. I will have had a completely different experience, possibly found something different, and you know for a fact that we often will take completely different ways of doing stuff, even when we're in co-op. Whatever the game is, actually, because I'm very much kind of, how far back can I stand from something and hurt it? Whereas you will charge in like a nutter and try and twat it, and within the confusion, the beast doesn't know what's going on and it's done for. But yeah, I do take a long time. Somebody asked me on Twitter today, sort of like, I hear that that such and such took 5 hours to beat the final boss of Ashes of Anriel. How long did it take you? And I'm like, not there yet.
I'm probably going to get that and finish that before you, right?
You probably will.
Yeah. So this is a weird show. Like, we're recording on Ariandel Eve, aren't we?
Yes. Well, unless you're on Xbox One.
I mean, that was a nice thing to... smugness aside, that's quite a nice thing to say. Ariandel Eve.
Sorry.
So we probably shouldn't talk about it because you know things, right?
No, it's just making me giggle at some of the reactions at the weekend. Because obviously I'm on the other side of the fence now, so I can be the world's biggest hypocrite. But there was anger, and I didn't know why they couldn't just like press the button on Steam and PSN and shoot it live. But
because it was Saturday and no one's in the office.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where I looked down an article and it was like, if you go offline and you access the content, then you should be all right. The game should just do it. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm pondering all these steps as to what I'm going to do, and I looked at an article as to how to get to the DLC, and just everything had already installed, so it was properly ready to go. So just jumped straight into it, really.
Bloody man. Bloody person.
So all of this build up that I'd had for tomorrow, and I have bought the season pass on both systems.
Of course you have.
So I can't really say I've not chucked my money at it, but yeah, it was somewhat of a pleasant surprise for me to be able to be playing it at the weekend. Plus, fatigue is always a beast with me, which might be one of the reasons why I kind of take a little time to do stuff, and because I can be up like 4:30 one morning or finishing like 9:30 at work the next night, or the shifts are always all over the place. So I don't know. I never want to game when I'm not really in the mood to game. I'll just turn to something else to distract in that regard. But I like to settle into Souls. I like to wallow in it a little bit. And I don't know what I do that's different to everybody else. But you're all better than me, all of you.
Oh, I'm not.
So, are you looking forward to the DLC, man? Given your reaction to Dark Souls 3, where are you?
Right. I'm going to blame CJ for this one. Right. So I had the money put aside. I had a little shelf of cash, and I thought, well, I'll go buy myself a PSN card. And I went to get the PSN card on Saturday. And I only bought Rise of the Bloody Tomb Raider instead. So I'm gonna sit this one out, I think, because I remember CJ playing Rise of the Tomb Raider last Christmas, and it was and having just posting loads of pictures, going, it's so pretty, and I saw it on the shelf, and I just thought, you know what, sod it. I haven't played a Tomb Raider game since Legend. And and I just thought let's do it. It's in the snow, and I'm a sucker for games in the snow.
Yes, I agree with that.
So I went to spend 15 and spent 40 instead.
How are you getting on with that thus far?
It's really pretty, and it's it's got that sort of, it's like a rare game in that there's 1,000 things to collect, and it's like a Mario game in that every time you think you found a hidden corner, the developers have been there before you and left something shiny, and it's just really tidy, isn't it, and well designed and tight in that sort of video game terminology that I don't really like but use all the time. Sense of design, I
remember last year when Digital Foundry did their
podcast favourites,
and I'm sure there was one bit where they were saying like, well, in this bit there's the volumetric lighting doesn't quite hit these floorboards, and you notice there's a little breakdown in the shadows there, and the textures aren't really that nice. And when I got to that section, I literally ran past it. An explosion happened. I fell down like a ravine or something. It's like, you lingered on that, and it's like 2 seconds. It's 2 seconds. It probably went like, well, should we keep the frame rate up? Yeah, well, how do we do that? Well, you're just running through this bit anyway. Nobody's going to look off into that corner.
Well, because the worry is that Digital Foundry will call them out for the frame rate plummeting to like 55 or something.
Well, there was that thing in Dying Light where they went to the top of a tower and just like turned on a sixpence for about 100 times. They were like, look, you can see the frame rate slowing down now. But who would do that? Who would do that?
No real people, I'll tell you that much.
Real people.
I'll tell you what annoys me about Rise of the Tomb Raider. Is that in the press kits they gave out to people, they gave it out to people in a PS1 box.
Yeah. I think we discussed this the last time.
I am so angry. I really, really want one.
Yeah, but I think that it would be really cool if all of the, even if it was like in special editions, all of the games that have got connections to the PS1, if they had those boxes in there. So if you got the Crash Bandicoot remaster, you got Resident Evil 7, you got Rise of the Tomb Raider. So if anything, I think it would encourage people to kind of build up like a little collection. You know how they used to do with anime boxes, where you'd have like episode 1, and then it would come in a box which would house all of the others in there. You could do that, but I'd love that. That'd be great.
I had a moment the other day where I realised that the games I've played on my PlayStation 4 this year have been Metal Gear Solid, because I was late getting to that, XCOM, Tomb Raider, and Doom, right? And
what year is it?
4 of my favourite PS1 games are Metal Gear Solid, XCOM, Tomb Raider, and Doom. And I just thought, just the idea there when you were saying that, like, even if you could just go online and print off PS1 style covers for PS4 games and just bung them in, strip down an old PS1 game, like an old FIFA that you can find in a charity shop, and just rehouse these PS4 games in PS1 boxes, I'd do it.
Do you know what? As a man who works in a charity shop, I actually have the means of accomplishing that, and because I've still got, when we got Bloodborne, we got it in our little press pack, so it came in a cardboard sleeve. So I've never yet found a real box for it. I'm quite tempted to knock up a really PS1 looking box for it, like not the official art, just some weird clip art of a dude in a coat.
Paddy, I can see you doing the scheming emote from Destiny on this.
I'm doing it.
Like, I actually work in a charity shop.
Just
I
use
can accomplish this.
Just use an old Nightmare Creatures box and just some really really bad Photoshop of Bloodborne.
Oh God, we have one of those. I can use that for reference.
There you go.
Shit.
Right, so we've hop, skipped and jumped across many of the games, but Martin, talk to me about Dark Souls 2, please.
What do you want to know? Which version?
Thoughts, your thoughts when you originally got it, and sort of moving up into kind of scholar.
Well, I really liked Dark Souls. I don't know if that's probably why I'm here. And so but by the time I got back round to it, when I walked away and I had my Dragon's Dogma incident, by incident I mean I got the platinum, and
what a game. Can we just state, from a design point of view as well, the sheer amount of ambition in that game and the things that it did embarrassed so much on this gen, or probably up until like The Witcher 3.
Oh, it's the last game you'd expect anybody to make, because it's full of insane design choices. And, well, what if we just did this? And what if, this is how games work? Well, we're not going to do that. It's like if you told somebody what an open world action adventure RPG was, but never let them play one, and then they had to go away and make it. And Dragon's Dogma is what you'd turn up with if you had no idea of sort of genre conventions and, defined logic. I
remember at the time that people were, journalists were bringing up like the map and going like, it's not as big as Skyrim's map. And it's like so much of that is just, so much of that is curated. And I really love the fact that, yes, at the start there were very few fast travel points, but it felt like you got to know the land. You built up muscle memory. Obviously, you were leveling up as you were killing the creatures and stuff, but it felt like you were going on an adventure. You had to factor in day and night into that, and there was this real childlike sense of jeopardy, of kind of not being home on time, not being able to find your way home, and being like, 7 years old in the summer holidays again. I adored that about it.
They're kind of, there's that story about Miyamoto when he came up with the idea for Zelda, was that he wanted to recreate that feeling of being lost in the woods. And, I think I kind of lost my way with Zelda when it went 3D. But Dragon's Dogma and Dark Souls are kind of the 3D Zeldas that Nintendo didn't know that I wanted. If that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, Dragon's Dogma is just, nighttime's terrifying.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't play Dying Light, but it's the most terrifying nighttime I've ever had in a video game.
Dying Light, I think you might enjoy Dying Light. It's a good game that's very cheap at the moment. But yeah, there was little things in Dragon's Dogma that still resonate with me, like the the undead that crawled out, but just the woman that came up just said, "Has anyone seen my baby?" And I was like, one line, and you just tore through me in a way that those creatures could never do that kind of damage. It resonated so massively.
But so I went through that and I loved it. And, I mean, Dragon's Dogma is like the great unappreciated video game of the last generation, in my opinion. And so Dark Souls 2, once I'd finished Dark Souls and went back to it with the Artorias of the Abyss stuff bolted on, and completely loved that. So when Dark Souls 2 got announced, I was in for a penny, in for a pound, and bought the stupid statue edition. And
it's not stupid, it's majestic. How dare you?
Sorry, Majestic Statue Edition.
Thank you.
And it is a very different game, and it sort of stakes it very clearly from the beginning. This isn't structured like a Dark Souls, and that sort of relaxed feeling of Majula. That it's no wonder nobody leaves, because you've got that late afternoon sun, and you've got that music, and you just kind of want to curl up on the grass, don't you? And just stay there, and it's very tranquil, and it's very sort of a game. If it's a game about running out of energy, or a world running out of energy, it's a very good. Like Majula's a very good microcosm of that. I just want to sit down and just rest, because I know there are all these monsters, but I just kind of want to sit down and just stay here.
Well, it's with the the motif of people coming there to forget, as well as the curse that's there as well. I mean, when you enter the game, you see what you think is a crack in the sky, but then you realise it's it's light leading beyond, that drawing you beyond. But when those chimes come in of the music, and you just see the rolling waves, and the ground kissed by a rainstorm, and it's, even to think about it now, like, genuinely knocks my socks off. And my herald waiting for me at the shore as I choke up again.
Here he goes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I mean, it's not the perfect game, but probably none of them are. But for that moment alone, that sort of, that lazy summer sun, that late afternoon and just the waves lapping. Just even if you never see the rest of the game, just spend a few hours in Majula.
Well, you've got the branching paths that go off from there to various different amounts of danger in various different places, but just it rocks my world still. It genuinely floors me.
Absolutely, and I mean that was sort of my experience with the first Dark Souls 2, if that's how we refer to it. And I sort of put it to one side and didn't play the DLC, and picked up Scholar when I bought my PlayStation 4 to play Bloodborne, and obviously either Dark Souls 2 was really well timed or counter-programmed, depending on how you want to read the story. So that was like the second PlayStation 4 game I bought. At which point, my wife's sort of giving me the look of like, you own this game. What are you doing? You've got multiple copies of. I'm banned from buying anything with Street Fighter 2 written on it, because it got up to about 20 copies of it, and it just, and she's got a point. But I bought Scholar and was immediately just, where people say about video games not looking like they remember, or that sort of that fake nostalgia. But maybe Dark Souls 2 doesn't look like how I remember it, but Scholar was how I remembered Dark Souls 2. It was beautiful, it was silky smooth, and I'm sure if I went back and played the PlayStation 3 version now, it wouldn't quite be that, and I haven't.
I am still curious to go back and give it another run in comparison to Scholar, because if anything now, having gotten used to Scholar, the original may well be like a remix on Scholar, so I am tempted by that, certainly.
And went through the DLC, and it's hard. And I think my moment, and I don't know if you guys kind of want me to talk about it or not, but my moment was, by that point, my father was very far into the throes of dementia, and sort of finding a game, that in a series that I love, that in a way, without stating it, is kind of about a very similar theme, was just so different. It was all that stuff was in Dark Souls 2, but finding it in Scholar when I got to Scholar, and where I was in my life when I got to Scholar, was just so different and so much more profound. And I've gone back and I've looked at YouTube videos, and the content is very similar, but I just didn't notice it at the first time, and the second time through, that sort of that notion of loss and finding these characters who remember you but they're not sure why, and know that they've got a quest, but every time you see them, another fragment of their story is slipped away from them. And it's just such an incredible thing to be in that game, or to be able to be read, even if it's not intentional, but to be read that way in that game, in some ways, story-wise, does put it at the top of the pile of the whole series.
Did you find a degree of, within that bond of solace or understanding, or just a place that was, I don't know, just felt kind of like home? I mean, when I was going through Scholar, I'd still got the the burglary stuff sort of in my background, and trying to get over the aftermath of when they came back to try and pull the boards off, and struggling at work to get used to being front facing, and when we were busy, and just I properly fell into that. And there was still the motif of Neil Oakey's story with his dad with Alzheimer's that was there, and the more that I found myself there, the more I found I found a home there, and I'm not even sure I was properly processing why, but I was just noticing more and more stuff, and it just felt like I'd given it a piece of my heart, and it gave me a piece of his. It's in return, and I can't quite quantify that, but that's what makes it that bond so enigmatic to me and so important.
I think some of it, and again, it's what you just said there about process, or doing it without processing it, and maybe processing it from a distance. But the whole thing about, and I forget his name, but the shopkeeper in Majula. Yes, the one who's sitting down.
The one that sounds like Mr. Kipling.
Yes. No, not the blacksmith.
I know what I mean. Yeah,
not the blacksmith. The sort of yellow.
Yeah, it is Mothman.
Frock.
Right.
Yeah,
And whenever you see him, he's always really pleased to see you, but can't quite put his finger on why. And he's got to sell you things, and he was going to leave, but he's not going to. And spending seeing his sort of, because you only get the sort of slightest part of his story, but a lot of that sort of echoes. I would go and visit my dad in the home that he was in, and he was always pleased to see me, but a lot of who I was and various bits were gone, and it was very much like we would just sit and I would hold his hand, and we would just sort of not say a lot to each other, but we were okay just being there. And a lot of Majula is that, it's just okay. What if I just sit here a while with you?
Fucking hell. You hit me square in the feels with that one.
Sorry.
No, please do not apologise for that, because any way that I fall into that game a little deeper is just fucking wonderful, and I'll notice that next time.
It's
in a big way.
And it wasn't, my wife would say, "Well, how is he?" And I would say, "Well, he's very much the same." I say, "Well, you were there 2 hours," and I say, "Yeah, well, we just sort of sit there, and comment on the weather or whatever, and." He would occasionally have moments of lucidity and quite often just not. But, Majula is very much that, isn't it? It's that, just sort of, here we are. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. So with that in your head and in your heart, and I know you spoke to me a little while ago with regards to introducing the class to. I know, looking at a game through a different lens in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'd been doing that kind of previously. I'd always used Silent Hill 2 as a teaching tool for narrative in games. And
that's a game that
and Dark Souls 2 sort of sits along it, and I mean, I'd been using Silent Hill 2 as my frame of reference for close to a decade now, and it's almost nice to have Dark Souls 2 to take its place, and in that case it's almost incidental that it's a Souls game because it's doing something very specific for me, and that's how I introduce them to it. I sort of sit them all down, I say, well, obviously, we're part of the education system and you guys have to get results, but let me just tell you a little story about me. And once they do that, they sort of reconfigure narrative in video games.
So you said that you'd mentioned sort of us within this as well, which was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I do sort of. I always direct them to, because one of the things that they have to do is they have to show that they can do research. So for them, that means Googling something, and I say, well, what about podcasts, and what about I mean, I always say go and play the games, but YouTube videos, and I direct them towards your podcast specifically with reference to the other guy's Alzheimer's story, and I say, what if a podcast wasn't just here's the news and here's some letters and whatever, and I say, well, what if they talk about video games not just in a is it any good, but what does it actually mean, or what does it mean to you?
So how do they process that with regards to going back through and I don't know, seeing the story or seeing the environmental story, or even if they start looking at lore stuff, I guess as well. I don't know if kind of the human story then interacts with like character stories, or there's lots of different angles that they could process that through, and I'm fascinated by that.
I think for them, and I used to get this a lot with my film studies students, but it's telling them the difference between what is it about and what happens, and they're very good at telling me what happens in Silent Hill 2, or even for their own examples of like an Assassin's Creed, or at the moment sort of Mafia 3, and I say, well, that's what happens, but what is it about? And film studies students, I always used to show Rocky, and I used to say, well, what's it about? And they would say boxing, and I'd say, no, that's what happens for 3 minutes at the end. And I'd say, well, what is it about? And then that's sort of the difference between sort of narrative and themes, and it's getting their heads around that. Which is,
have they ever kind of found themselves in it and sort of brought forth like your own stories in that regard, or is that maybe a bit too I don't know, deep for them to do?
I think if they did, they might not necessarily share that back with me, and that's okay. I mean, I've had a lot of them say, that when they've had stuff going on in their lives, they've sort of fallen into a specific game, but quite often that might just be, I played a lot of Fire Emblem at this point because I didn't have to think when I was playing it, and I don't go to great lengths to sort of probe them. What I say is, if I open this part of me, and you can take that in any way you want, that's great. Do
you find the personal stories sort of making it through to the games that they're creating as well?
Less,
even if it's in more of an oblique nature, that you can look at them and go, yeah, I can see why there might be something there that you're trying to explore personally, or there's something that you can't tell people that's maybe coming to the fore in the games. Does that?
It's quite interesting because when they start, there's a lot of platformers, there's a lot of shooters, and then there's there are a lot of things that they put more of themselves into the games, as the time goes on. And I got one story that was set in an old people's retirement home, and I had a suspicion that it was because a member of their family had just gone into a retirement home, so they'd actually had first-hand experience in one. But I always try and limit the number of questions that I ask about that. I
suppose there's certain things that you can then notice in the work and sort of try and process, not just where their head is, but the things that they're exploring through it, and that's wonderful for games to be that sort of lens and that prism, I guess.
Absolutely.
I find all of this fascinating, genuinely fascinating. In this regard, I mean, will you come back and talk to us again about sort of general game stuff and growing up? It would be great to have you on sort of the humanities at this point and find out sort of where you came from, because talking about the games, but especially talking about the student stuff has been a genuine pleasure. You're an amazing teacher, and just hearing these stories back, and I know as a child I'd have really latched on to that kind of teaching method, and somebody with that much passion that would let me kind of grow and express as much as that. And there were very, very few teachers that did that sort of, back in my school and stuff. So, like I say, a million times thank you for coming on and talking to us about this. But yeah, I'm in awe of you, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been absolutely wonderful.
I can only concur what CJ has said with his wonderful words. Yeah, this has been so interesting, like hearing about the way you teach and like the how the brain of a 16-year-old is wired these days, because I'd still consider myself young, but like definitely out of touch with the youth.
What I always said is, or the moment that I had a few weeks ago, is when I realised that every single one of my students, or the crop at the moment, are younger than the Matrix.
Oh, come on!
Yep.
No.
There it is.
Jesus Christ.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
That hurts me on the inside.
Which means that most of them haven't seen the Matrix.
Oh.
And have yet to find out just how much it cribbed off of Grant Morrison's The Invisibles.
Absolutely. But they all say...
Do you find yourself getting frustrated? Because, like, I've got a lot of volunteers at work, and I work with a couple of people that are, like, 18, 19. And I found a Mega Drive the other week. I went, oh, cool, look at this. And they go, what's that? And you're like, come on, be older.
I brought out a Super Nintendo, or my Super Nintendo, in work the other week, and they were all just laughing at it, you know.
What?
Like, because one of them said it looked like a George Foreman grill. And
That's a PS3.
And
then you should bring out the Dreamcast and just go, and here's the Breville Pie Master.
Well, I've done that before, and they all just freak out at the Microsoft logo on it.
Yeah,
because it's got obviously ran, was it Windows CE in the background, so they all just lose their minds at that, and they say, "Oh, is this the original Xbox?" And then you realise you are working with incredibly young people. You know,
there's a video on YouTube of a guy who works for the NBA before it was the National Video Game Arcade, who did the amazing presentation at Game City a few years ago of. It was Commodore versus Spectrum argy-bargy, where they tongue-in-cheek sort of said that they'd only got so much room for video game history, and one of the two would have to go, and they're going to argue as to which one was going to get the boot. But they set it above they set it in a curry house.
Right.
So there were loads of Commodores and Spectrums in the corner. Like if you were backing the Spectrum, you sat on the tables with the red. The red tablecloths. If you're back in Commodore, you sat on the table with the blue tablecloths. And one of the guys from there that was doing it has got a video on YouTube of showing the Commodore 64 to kids and them being fascinated with loading a game and kind of setting a cassette going and it's not working yet, and just all the mechanics and stuff. It was almost like. It reminded me of being a little kid and being shown how to work a record player. It was fascinating. But yeah, it's really cool.
Every time one of them says to me, "Oh, well, I bought this game, but the load times are disgraceful," you know, and you think back to, you know, you set away, because I was a Spectrum kid, and you start the tape and the load screen loads, and then you get that 10-minute counter of, you know, you can play Narc in 10 minutes. So you'd just go away, you'd go outside and play football for 10 minutes, then you'd come in and realise that it hadn't loaded properly, so you'd start it again. And
I had the thing as a Commodore kid whereby I'd set the thing going, and then the loading screen would kick on, or if it was like an Ocean thing or like a Lass Ninja, you get your loading music, and it would be like this genuine holding my breath. And as someone that still nerds out on Sid Chip stuff, just hearing brand new music from musicians who were my Beatles. My folks didn't understand what that meant to me. And I just sat there and just held my breath and just kind of zenned out to it. But yeah, Commodore stuff with the loading was just amazing with that kind of music.
I was also really jealous when I'd go around my friend's house and we would play, I think it was Target Renegade, and that had the load music, and it was the first time I'd ever seen it, you know. And
the Ocean loading music, yeah.
And every time after that, when we would go to my house and the Spectrum dreadful modem noise was playing as it was loading, and I would just sort of quietly turn the television down out of embarrassment. You know, that sort of old black and white television. It was probably about 12 inches or something, and just you'd say, "Oh, what's that horrible noise? Should we go to my house?" Bastard.
Well, I still remember, like, my friend Jeff had one of these, I suppose you could call them like a caravan telly, where it was just like a block that had a handle that you kind of propped it up on, and there was a tiny black and white telly in the corner of it, and then on the top there would be a cassette player, and there'd be all these sort of things in there, and we'd plug the Commodore and the Amiga and the ST and all that kind of stuff in, and just record music. And there was me as a nerd, sort of walking around my paper round, like the Walkman on one side, pretty much the same weight as the papers in the back on the other side, but just listening to game music, which is, yeah.
I had a moment just quickly, last week. I had a bunch of students who were trying to work out, because my year 12s haven't been working with Game Maker very long, and they were trying to work out how they wanted the character to move. And what I worked out, the way they were describing it, I ended up having a whole room of kids playing Horace Goes Skiing.
No!
Just a whole bunch of them just desperately trying to finish this game. You know, because obviously it just boots in a browser now. And they loved it. You know, they were all just like, oh, it's just Frogger, or the initial, it's just Crossy Road. Because I'm so old. And then like the first one of them managed to get the skis, and then one of them managed to get back across the road and actually go skiing. And it was like, oh my god, you can go skiing, you know? I was like, it's called fucking Horace Goes Skiing. But it was just wonderful to look around the room and just see all these Spectrum games, this one Spectrum game, just 20 versions of it all going at once, and it was interesting how they all got into it.
I suppose a lot of that, the simplicity of design with that, would probably relate to, you know, some of the more popular mobile games, I guess, now. So that's not probably too big a leap of faith. Although I remember some kids sitting around, and Game City probably about 3 or 4 years ago, sitting around Granny's Garden on the BBC Micro.
Oh, wow.
And being genuinely terrified.
I showed them how to be a complete bastard.
Cool.
Which kind of blew their mind, and I was sitting the whole time hoping like the head teacher didn't walk in, but because they were kind of saying, well, what do you do? And I said, well, you just kind of be a bastard. And so,
it was the Rick Mail one, wasn't it?
And it's really, I don't know if you guys remember it at all, but the top half of the screen is like the x-axis of the room, and the bottom half is the y-axis. So you see the same thing from two perspectives at once, because they wanted to create a 3D environment, but obviously the Spectrum couldn't do it.
But that
Weird.
brings me to something that was in the new Retro Gamer, where they were saying about the old games that were based on British TV series. Like there was a Neighbours game, and you know, a Monty Python game, and all that sort of stuff, and how that's disappeared in.
And there was a Viz game, wasn't there?
It was, yeah.
Which was really weird.
There was a Biker Grove one, I think, as well, where you could die in the first screen.
No.
Was it Biker Hill, Grange Hill, one of those ones?
I don't know.
Grange Hill
like
rings a bell.
Press X to put Tipex in Deck's eyes. That seems like the perfect place to pause it then. with Tipex in the eyes of a tiny TV presenter. Thank you again, Martin, for joining us. It's been double cool, man, and you know, we will definitely speak again. So, yes.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.